Hi there, I've got a fun little project, a spiral bead ring. It's never going to be as strong as a soldered ring, but it's just a fun fashion ring. So you can do it with a tight spiral, or you can see this is the bare bones of the ring, and then you can put the bead setting or the whatever you want to glue on top of it. So start off with 0.8 of a millimeter wire, 20 gauge, make a little hook at the end, and I'm working off a spool right now. Make a little hook and squeeze that together to make like you would a head pin. And that's the middle part and the start of the spiral. And then holding that tight, just wrap the wire around itself. And you want to make a tight spiral in the center, and then you can open it up and leave a little space around the spiral. You don't have to, you can make it a tight spiral all the way, but this is just, I don't know, it makes it a bit bigger than the smaller version. So then bring the wire closer together when you start finishing off for the radius that you want it. So there's your spiral, that will be your center of the ring. Now cut it off the spool, leaving, say about 8 to 9 inches. And then you want to hammer the spiral that you've just made, because that will harden it, temper it, work harden it. You know, you need that to be a solid front for the ring. So give that a sort of stroke hammer on your steel block, and just if it sort of moves around, you can always bring it back, but that's roughly what you want, and that will make it nice and firm. Now get your chain nose pliers and make a bend, a right angle bend in the projecting wire coming out from the spiral. And then you're going to wrap this around either a cylindrical mandrel that you've got, or if you've got a ring triblet like me, a ring mandrel, just wrap that excess wire around and around a slightly smaller size, one size smaller than your actual ring size. And you should just have enough. If you've got too much excess wire, you can always trim it off at this end, but you want enough to post the very end. So you've got about 3 rings at the back, 3 rings for the shank of the wire. You see about 3 there. You can do it with 2, you can do it with 4, it doesn't matter. And then just bring the wire through to secure it. So you just need to make a little loop to secure it around the last ring of the spiral. Now I've got a little bit too much. I don't want to make it too bulky or big on the side. So you can just trim it as you need to trim it, just to make a tiny little link to secure it on the side. Now put it back onto your ring stick or your mandrel, your cylindrical former, whatever you're using, and then just start manipulating the piece a little bit, the wire, so that it sits roughly at the middle of the ring. Now I'm cutting off some 0.4 millimeter wire, some little binding thin wire, because this little bit at the side needs connecting. It needs sort of a little bit of sewing together. So I'm going to use the shorter end to start wrapping few, 2 or 3 wraps. This is where, in traditional jewelry you would solder something, but because I can't solder anything, I'm going to use this binding wire to connect it all together just by that big spiral, and that means the spiral will and the shank will stay put. So don't trim anything off at that point, just bring the wire across at the back and then take it across to the opposite side of the shank, the other side of the spiral, and do a couple more wraps around there, just making sure that it's all gripped together there. Now this is where those rings at the back can slip, and I'm glad it's happening, because sometimes it doesn't happen to me, but I'm glad it's happening because you can see if this happens to you. This is the bit of troubleshooting. Just sort of get them back in order. So you've got 3 rings or 2 rings, whatever you've got for your shank, and just make sure that they're not twisted at the back. Once you've done a few little wraps like that to secure, cut off the excess wire at the front of the ring. It's always better to have the cut off ends at the front, so that when you're pushing your finger through the ring, it doesn't, get loose or, start sort of sticking out and then scratch your finger. So always keep those cut ends on the outside of the ring and make sure you really squidge them down and with your pliers. So really give them a good old squidge, and you can keep putting it onto the mandrel or the cylinder, whatever you're making the shank, the rounded part of the ring. Keep putting it back on there to reshape it, because it'll get distorted very quickly just with all this manhandling. And then use your hammer. Once you've got the whole thing bound and secured with the 0.4 wires, just make sure that they're sort of all flattened out and hammered so that the piece is completely work hardened. And obviously turn it round, because my ring mandrel is tapered, so I'm just hammering from both sides. You can see how that's widened the ring. That's why I said when you wrap the coils at the back of the ring, or to make the ring shank, make them a bit smaller than the ring that you want, because by the time you've hammered it and sort of resized it, it will open up. And then that little 0.4 wire at the back, make sure it's hidden behind the central spiral. So that's the base of your ring. And now we're going to make the little stone setting or bead setting. I've got a rose quartz bead here, so you can use a little semi-precious stone. It's literally a bead, any bead will do. So this is, I think it's about 4 mil, but I'm going to make a circle that is just large enough to fit that bead. So you see, I'm just playing with where should I put it on my round nose pliers to make a little coil that the bead can sit into. So it's just got to be that bit bigger, but not too loose, that bit bigger than the bead. And now cut off, depending on the size of your bead, obviously, cut off a sort of, well, I'm cutting off about an inch, just over an inch from the spool. And this long extension here, or this little extension rather, it's not that long, create a tight spiral again. So a little sort of hook there, and then curl it round and around and around. And when that comes in towards the coil, that will form the base of that little coil that you made. So there's a little sort of now a nice base or end, or sort of flattened area, which is what you're going to use to glue. So just check it's completely flat, check that your bead can fit in it at this stage. And you might find, like I have, and it's always better that you make it too long, that you need to snip down, and you can use these as jump rings. So, don't worry if you have to snip off 2 or 3, and just keep going until you find that the bead is not completely swallowed up into that coil. You want to see a little bit of the bead, but it's going to sit inside that setting. So I'm going to use E6000 glue to get everything glued together. So I'm putting a bit of glue at the center of the ring that I just made, the center of the spiral. I'm going to glue the little coil onto the front and center of my ring. So there's my little wire setting. And then I'm going to put a bit of glue again, and I'm just using a piece of aluminium wire to do that, to inside the coil, inside that little gap. And my glue is actually, my workshop's so cold that my glue is cooling off so quickly, it's going quite rubbery too quickly. And then I'm going to push that bead into that coil so it sits inside like a setting. Obviously I'm going to put the holes of the bead on the outside, so make sure that you don't have the hole right at the top, and just push it in and make sure it's sitting in the middle. So you can spend a bit more time than me just making sure it's, so there's my first one and there's my second one, and if, just take your time doing it. But as you can see, you can do the spiral close or you can do the spiral spread out, and that's all that it is. It's just a spiral ring. And Just have fun making these with different beads. Thank you for watching.